Hello and welcome back to our latest episode of our podcast, You're Better Than That, hosted by me, Hannah Miller. And today's episode is all about the topic of regrets. This episode has been inspired by a thought I had around a woman I met years ago. It's a woman who I've known. In fact, I can share her name. Her name is Emma Borg. And Emma died quite early in her life. She died about the age of 50 from breast cancer, leaving behind a lovely husband and 3 teenage daughters. And one of the things that was said about her in a funeral was that she didn't have any regrets. And I remember coming away from her funeral and thinking, do I feel like that? Do I feel like I don't have any regrets? And for some reason that came to mind recently, and I thought it would be a really good basis for a conversation for a podcast. How do we feel about regrets? What is a regret? What's a worthwhile regret to have, and what's not so worthwhile to have?
I think a really good place to start...
Hello, Zoe.
Hello. A good place to start might be, do you think regrets are a good thing, or do you think they're a bad thing?
And that's a really good question, because when she said that, I don't have any regrets, I was reflecting on that and thinking, I think I probably do have some regrets and she doesn't. And so I thought, is that because I haven't made as good use of my life as she has? And is that why I've got that sense of regret? But I also asked the question on Instagram, and I asked people what they thought about regrets. Do they have regrets? And I actually think we might be using a slightly different definition for regret. I think probably what Emma was saying was that she's lived wholeheartedly, and even when things didn't go right, she doesn't regret it. She did her best. She gave her best. And of the major things in her life, she gave it her all and was there. And that is something for her to have been incredibly proud of, that she gave her all to what she believed in. She gave her all to her family, to the charity she started. And I think that perhaps that she's taking this, she was an uber positive person. So she's taking that kind of, actually, you know what, in the grand scheme, it's all right. But I wonder whether actually having a regret after something is okay, because it shows us where we might want to modify our behaviour. What do you think about regrets?
It could be to do with people's strengths as well.
Yeah.
Because I have strengths that are kind of like, get stuff done, go for it. I'm a dreamer, I love to go. And so I lean on the side that regrets are, you didn't give it enough. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's kind of where I sit in the tension of, I would hate to look back and say and have regret, because that means I didn't push hard enough. But what would you say to that?
Yeah, and I think probably that's the way Emma was using it, that she was a go after it kind of person, and she really did live her life to the full. I think maybe another way of looking at regrets, or maybe sometimes where we think I could have done that differently, or I could have handled it differently. But of course, in the grand scheme, we learn from everything. Like, for example, I probably regret not working a little bit harder in my upper 6 of my A-level year. I was quite distracted by a certain young man, and was also out, being a classic sort of 17-year-old and not making brilliant choices. In the grand scheme, has it stopped me from doing anything that I wanted to? No, actually, I did well enough to go to my first choice uni. I didn't have, it didn't even create a squiggly curveball for me, but I may regret a little bit that I didn't work a bit harder. And then I guess there are times when I regret the way I might have treated some people. There's a couple of people I think about that I look back and I think I could have handled that so much better, especially probably in those teenage years, particularly. I think a couple of friendships that didn't last the test of time that could have done had I been a little bit wiser or handled them a little bit better. So those kind of regrets have probably informed better behaviour going forward. I think that's okay.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I wonder if the negative part of regret is regretting something and then staying in that place and beating yourself up about it for the rest of your life. Whereas you saying, okay, I regret treating someone in that way has made you then move forward and think, I want to be different in that area. So it's
regrets while you've got time to do something different are better because they can change your behaviour. And like you say, a regret that then means that you stay stuck or you don't move forward, that there's nothing, particularly helpful about that. It's just a waste of emotional energy. So I reckon, regrets that make you think, okay, I will often say, what's the, it's so cheesy and the boys, will roll their eyes, but what's the learning here? If there's learning that can come from it, then there's nothing to kind of regret. But of course, there are going to be things in life where we might say, if I'd, not done that thing, or if I'd not got, people who would say, if I hadn't got in the car that day, then this might not have happened. And loads of sliding door moments of life that we might regret, but have the chance to do better and be better. There was a conversation on The Rest is Politics, which is a podcast I like, and they were discussing regrets then, actually. And Rory and Alistair are a little bit further down the line in their life. I think Rory's in his 50s and I think Alistair might be 60s, later 60s. And they were looking back on their life and what were their regrets. And again, they've both lived life to the full. But I think Alistair said he regretted he wasn't a little bit more present when his children were young. And that's a valid regret and something that he's probably made up for as time's gone by. And Rory regretted a job that he took, which I thought was quite interesting, again for podcast thinking. He said that he'd taken a job at Harvard years ago, and he reckons that he took the job for all the wrong reasons. It had played, he said this, he said it had played to my ego, it looked like an amazing opportunity, it was going to be well paid, but probably didn't play to his strengths. And the wrong reasons were what he used to make the decision for that job. And I was thinking about that. And I was thinking about the amount of coaching I do with people who find themselves in jobs that they wish they weren't in. And there's learning around, why do we choose the roles and jobs and careers that we have? Yes, we have to pay our bills. Yes, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a big splash and to do something that's really meaningful. But there was too much compromise in that role for Rory, and it didn't actually play to his strengths and led him to he left. He ended up having to leave that role and move on to something else. The great thing about life, though, is that often if we take the lessons and we take the learning, it all feeds into the next season and helps us grow really well.
Would you say, I mean, you don't have to answer this, but do you have any regrets, specifics?
So, as well as the A-levels regret, I think a current regret, if this can be a current regret, which I think will be a regret when I'm older. That's a weird thing to say. I'm looking at my life now, and I think when I'm older, I will say to somebody who's my age, I will say, don't sweat the small stuff. I remember somebody said it to me, a lady called Annie Hughes, who you and I both know. She brought up 3 sons, same as me. And I remember her saying to me, she wishes sometimes she hadn't sweated the small stuff as much as she had. And what she meant was, sometimes the things that in the heat of the day and in the moment that you're in, like, for example, there are always like 20 pairs of shoes in the hallway. It can really bother me more than it probably should. And coats being not put where they should be, and other small things that when I take a step back, in the grand scheme, I will probably regret that bothered me. I feel emotional even talking about that, because I know it's something that is a bit of a character trait that I'm currently wanting to work on. And yet sometimes it's only with the benefit of hindsight that we wish we'd been different, because when you're in that stage, the best you can do is show some compassion to yourself that you're juggling a great deal. And sometimes these little things can feel not like small things, but big things. I've told you a million times to put your towel back on the radiator, those kind of things that feel like there's something that matters, when really I will probably become a grandparent one day and think, oh, none of that really mattered, and be able to do that as a grandparent and not care about the shoes in the hallway and all the rest of it.
I think that's really healthy as well, of measuring if something happens in the moment, in 10 years' time, like, will I care about this? Yeah. And I use that with myself sometimes. If I've done something that I'm like, oh, that was cringe, or that felt embarrassing to do. If I tell myself, in 10 years' time, are you going to be thinking about this? If the answer's no, then why am I sweating it now?
That's right. And even sometimes, will I even care about this in 2 weeks?
Yeah,
I probably won't. Sometimes it's as unimportant. And I think probably many parents will regret the fact that they have felt squeezed and therefore they've prioritised the wrong things. But I kind of want to reflect on that and think maybe you can't fully help that when you're in that phase. And that's why so many parents love being grandparents, because it is a lovely opportunity to do it again with all the learning, and then you don't have to worry about sweating the small stuff. You get to take all the things you've learned from the first time round. I'm not a grandparent, by the way, and nowhere near becoming one just for the sake of the recording, but I am a great aunt. I'm going to be a great auntie again this year. I've just found out this week. So I hope I can say that on the podcast. I've said it now. I haven't said who the baby belongs to.
Maybe you could find out and then we can cut it out.
I think we're okay. I think we'll be okay. It's going to be very niche. People are even going to notice that I've said that. No, but I think what I'm trying to verbalise is that there's things that we do, even our current behaviours, that I can almost sense I might regret a little bit when I'm older, but I can't fully stop the train I'm on. But I do sometimes now. I heard a guy talk years ago, and he talked about, counting to 5 before you walk in the house, like reframing a little bit before you walk in, deciding what matters, what's important. And for those first things that you say not to be, look at the shoes in the hall, and whatever it might be that you immediately notice, because it can be so easy to just walk in from being somewhere else and notice what wasn't right.
But then what's the I feel like I'm always saying, what's the balance between actually, if you prefer the shoes not to be in the hallway, like that's valid, and then not sweating the small things, like how do you find the in between of that's a value of yours, but also you don't want to in the future regret saying it so many times.
But this even goes back to it. This is a bit of a rabbit hole here, but I even think it does matter to me because I like order. But when I was a teenager, I was really messy and disorganised. And so is it something that really matters to me, or is it something that is almost societally, I think it's better and that I should be on top of everything? And does it matter to me as much as I think it does? It probably does. I think the sweating the small stuff thing is at the cost of any relationship, or how important it is for me to bring those things up with my kids when that might be my first interaction of the afternoon. So I think the current regret I might have is that sometimes it feels really fast and life feels fast, and I find it hard to be present. And I know we're going to have a conversation a bit more about overwhelm, so maybe we can come back to that and carry on talking about it. I think one of the things about regrets that I thought would be really good for us to talk about is actually there was a piece of work done on regrets, and it comes in the form of this book. Actually, I listened to some podcasts with the woman who wrote this book. The book's called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and it's written by a lady called Bronnie Ware. And Bronnie Ware was a palliative care nurse, and so what she did was spend a lot of time with people at the end of their life. And as she spent time with them, she began to track and understand that there were definitely 5 key regrets that were the main things that people said to her. And so she turned that into a book, and she explores this idea of how can we learn from other people's regrets, like Annie saying to me, don't sweat the small stuff. How can we learn from other people's regrets that they wish they had done differently while we're living our life right now? So do you want to know what they are? I thought we could talk about them in more detail. But so Bronnie Ware, she talks about the top 5 regrets of the dying. These were the top 5 things. So number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. Whew. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number 3, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. 4, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. And 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. Those are biggies. And you can imagine her kind of getting that from conversations with people who are kind of facing the end of their life and thinking, how might I have wanted my life to look different? And even though there will have been some people who didn't have regrets, these were clearly themes that came out for people when they had that chance to think. So the first one, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. That kind of goes back to the idea of what's that sense of personal purpose, I think. And I would imagine loads of those conversations were, Mum and Dad thought I should be a doctor, or everyone at school said I was good at science, so I should do that, or everyone in my family was a lawyer, so I thought I should be one too, or I had to provide for my family and I didn't have the courage to do something different that was really, in my heart to do. And I think we become products of our environment there, and we hear what others expect of us, and it can take a lot of courage to step away from what other people expect you to be. I really think so. I think I even remember being, fresh out of uni and stepping away from my first job, my graduate job that I got, and telling people that I wasn't going to do that anymore, and actually getting a bit of pushback around it, and people saying you're making a really big mistake. And I look back now and I have to say I'm glad I had the courage of that conviction, because my whole trajectory of adult life could have gone really differently, and I could have been standing here saying I wish I'd had the courage to live a life that was true to myself and not the life others expected of me. I think the flip side though is we do have responsibility to others, and we can't just live a totally selfish choice, can we? We can't just say, well, I don't want to live anyone's expectations. All that matters is me, and I don't care that any of my family have needs, or I've got to provide for them. I'm just going to do what I want. I don't know whether that's possible, but being true to yourself, I wonder what you think. Yeah. What do you think that means?
My mind went immediately to social media, which is interesting.
Interesting.
I wonder if part of it could be, when it comes to posting, and maybe it's more in my generation, this is a thing of people thinking, oh, this is worthy of being posted because...
I definitely go through that.
And like, oh, actually, that's not a big deal. Even if it's something that you want to celebrate, actually, it's not a big deal to other people, so I won't post that or share that on social media. And actually, my head went to, what does it look like to healthily share online and share with friends and family and wider people what I care about, even if I think actually it might not matter to other people.
Yeah, and I think there's an exercise to be done, isn't there, around what does it mean to be true to myself? I think you've got to know who you are to live true to yourself, and we grow in our knowledge of ourselves. And I think alongside that, we did an episode on it recently, you've got to know what your values are. And if your value is adventure, you're not living true to yourself if you say no every time there's anything risky or there's an opportunity to go on an adventure. If you play small when being true to yourself is a much bigger opportunity, then that's when you're going to feel that sense of regret. I've recently been to Asia to visit some projects of a charity that I support, and I nearly didn't go for a whole host of reasons. And one of those was, should I be leaving the kids? Should I go this far away? What if something happens when I'm away at home? Who do I even think I am, going and taking this time out of work to do this? There were all sorts of ridiculous things going through my head, but I'd always wanted to visit this country, and it wouldn't have been true to myself to step back. And I have to say, I'm really grateful to Sam for saying, you need to do this. It's the right thing to do, because I think I would have regretted that decision in hindsight if I hadn't have gone. So I think you've got to know, what are those, like, Marcus Buckingham calls them red threads. What are the threads and the themes that matter to you that you can run after? And we do have to earn a living, but at what cost? At what cost do we go after further promotion when actually you think, do you know what, that's not me? And I think being true to yourself is knowing your lane. It's knowing the things that this is the stuff that I'm here to do. And actually I can confidently say no to that, because I wouldn't be being true to myself if I took it. And so, I love Clifton Strengths. We talk about it on the podcast. We're going to keep talking about it. Knowing what your strengths are helps you make better choices and think, actually, that's no good. That's not a good fit for me. Why would I want to do that?
What would you say to the person who maybe might not have the privilege to think, oh, I want to go after something, otherwise I'm going to regret it, and they might be working over hours just to like meet the line? what does it look like to not have any regrets when you're in that position?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you're right. Not everyone, for all sorts of reasons, has the privilege. They could be in a situation where they're single parenting. They could be somebody who actually, I've just got to make sure I'm earning some money. I think there's something to be said about trying to make space for the dream and finding a way to give it an outlet, even if it's going to take some time. Mm-hmm. This is nothing to do with anything, but it's just come to mind. I remember seeing it's the film version of Peter Pan. It was the Peter Pan with people, and my boys loved that film, and we would watch it over and over, and I would cry every time we watched it, because there's a beautiful part at the end. But there's a scene where the little Wendy is cross with her dad. And she says about her dad being a coward. And the mum says, your dad's not a coward. Your dad has the courage to put his dreams away in a drawer every night and do what's right for this family. And it actually made me think of my dad in a different light, that he'd put some things aside for the sake of us as a family that was quite courageous. So I think it's about, when you have to make those choices, it's recognising that's a really courageous thing to do, actually, to choose something that's difficult and maybe not what you'd prefer to do. I've just read a book where it's called The Four Winds, and the man in it runs off and leaves his family to be true to himself. So at what cost should we be true to ourselves? He ruins, the way they feel about him for the rest of their lives. So there's definitely balance in this. But what I would say is, if you're in that position where maybe you feel, I'd love to be a teacher, and right now that feels 10 steps away, I would say start where you are and find one thing that you can do and just get yourself a bit closer. Don't shut the door. Do something that can get you a little bit closer. You've got a life ahead of you. See what you can do that gets you towards it.
What's the next regret?
I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Oh, that's a good and topical one. I think this one is going to lead into a conversation we're going to have, but the working so hard again is about not having priorities in order in that middle period of life, right? I imagine most of the people who said that were talking about when they had got family in their home. I imagine it's then. It's the years when it's am I going to have the chance to go and watch my son's sports game, or his piano recital, or my daughter's, whatever she's involved with, her football game or her singing or whatever she's doing, or am I going to be out the country and elsewhere? And again, we haven't got full control over this. I think this is probably universal, because it is just the challenge of a squeezed period of life for most people. And yet that doesn't mean we then make no progress. And I think one of the things that I would like to be doing in this season of my life, which I'm not doing as well as I did when the boys were younger, is one of the things that helped us when the boys were younger is that we kind of had a set of parameters about how our general week was going to look, i.e. how many nights certain things would be going on. And we had a bit of a rule as a family that when the boys were young, we would rarely do something on a Saturday night that didn't mean we were going to be together. And that was like a real rule. We'd break it obviously for the good reasons, but that acted as like this marker that was untouchable. We also had a thing about how many times a week we try and sit around the dinner table together, and you put some of these things in place and you build around it as much as you can. The thing is, if you don't have any of those not rules or guidelines or what you'd like to happen, you're just going to fill the time, and there's no parameters in place to help you make good decisions. But because we had this, we're going to be together on a Saturday, it meant that we would make a decision about a Saturday rather than it would just passively happen. And the reason I'm talking about that is I feel like I need to do a redo of that in this season of my life. My children are older now. It's different. We're in different phases. There's different things going on. But how do I make sure I build in those outlets that mean I'm not just working? Some people talk about the importance of rest all the time. Some people use the language of having a Sabbath or having a day away. Some people are talking about 4-day weeks, working week. There's all sorts of things around to try and protect us from the bleed of working really hard. And if you're listening to this and you think there is a potential that you could have this regret, and I'm talking to myself here, it's going back to what are some parameters I can put in place, whether I'm single, whether I live on my own, whether I live with other people, that protect me from letting work bleed into every area of my life, because it will if you'll let it.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's true. What's next?
Okay, because I think there's more to come on that one at another time. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Interesting. Now, I'm a feeler and I do express my feelings. My regret might be, I wish I'd had the time to control my feelings. I wish I'd had the courage to control my feelings, or the sense to not say what needs to be said. So this one I don't relate to as much. I think this probably comes across to a couple of things. Some people are willing to put their own feelings aside for the sake of others, and they don't say when they don't like something, or when something's uncomfortable, or they put the needs of others ahead of themselves, or they don't. Some people don't show their feelings and don't express how much people mean to them, and how much they love them, or say the words, or say the things out loud, or give the hug, or be real. And I think most of the time, this one is the one that I feel like, I do express my feelings. Sometimes though, they don't come out very healthily. And one thing I've noticed is sometimes maybe when I'm cross about something, or I'm cross with Sam, if I'm being really emotionally intelligent and I can stop enough to think this isn't really the thing, there's something else, that's when it goes much better. So there was one time where we were having, one of the things that causes rows in our family is when we're doing the diary and we're working out who's doing what and where, you can imagine. And sometimes those conversations in the past have been quite tetchy, because it's been the whole who's doing what and where are we. And there was one time where it got really tetchy. And as we were in the middle of having a bit of a row, I stopped for a moment and I got a little bit upset, and I said, the reason this upsets me is because I miss you when you're not here. And so switching it to just expressing my feelings just made everyone take a breath, and it totally changed the atmosphere about the conversation. I was cross because I miss him, and that was the thing, but it was coming out as petulance and, I'm cross with you. So I think if you are more of an expressive person, maybe it's about trying to be honest about what's the underlying emotion that's driving the feeling. And if you're somebody who doesn't tend to say, just be 10% braver and say, again, what's the worst that can happen? Tell the person you love them. Tell them what they mean to you. Tell them you're proud.
What's next?
Number 4, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. Now,
you're good at this though.
Do you think?
Yeah.
I don't think I am. I try. It takes planning, I think. Had a message just a couple of weeks ago from some uni friends, and we haven't seen each other for years. And they were like, shall we make this a year where we get together? We live in different places and one of us lives in a different country. But I'm really keen to just get back connected with them this year. I think it takes such a lot of intentionality, because the world is fighting for your time all the time. And the thing that frustrates me with this is, you'll say to a friend, I'd love to have dinner, let's meet up. And literally it's 3 months away before you can, all you do is spend text messages going back and forth saying, I can do this date, no, I can't do that one. And then you just end up giving up.
Yeah, it's so
You
true.
end up giving up and it doesn't happen. You have to fight really hard for this. My dad had a school reunion this week.
Yeah.
And he's 84 in July. Now, I think that's really impressive. He lives in a different part of the country. He came back up to here, stayed with me and went to it. And do you know what? It was so good for his soul. You saw him, you were here, weren't you? When he came into the house, that was so good for him. And there's something about friends from the different seasons of our lives that they know us in a way that others don't. Charlotte is my primary school friend that I hope she might be listening. And Charlie and I were still friends. And when I'm with her, I laugh more than any other individual. She makes me sob with laughter. We cry and with laughter. I just want to be with her for that. But it takes so much effort because she's busy and I'm busy and life is busy. And then you've got your current friends and obviously you're in the circle that you're in. So I hope that I will not have that regret, and I hope that I will fight hard to keep in touch with people that have loved me and known me through the years, because I want to take people through my life. Some people are for seasons as well, though, right?
That's true.
Not everyone goes
true.
all the way through. We can't hold on to everyone. Last one. I wish I'd let myself be happier.
Interesting.
I know, really interesting. I wonder whether that is for people around letting the weight of the world take away happiness, maybe.
Yeah.
Whether it's about, I don't know, whether it was not having the courage to make a decision that would make them happier. That feels a bit more like the being true to myself. And I actually think that first one, here's a little bit of an epiphany. That first one, I wish I'd been true to myself. Almost, if you get that one right, all the others are going to follow.
All fall into place.
Because you will share your emotions and you will stay in touch with your friends because you're being true to yourself. So whether happiness, which is transient, it again depends what people mean by the word happy.
That's true.
But is it this idea of, is it about the weight of the world and regretting letting things become too heavy and too serious?
Yeah, you're right. And I do think they kind of weave together, because if you're more true to yourself, you're doing what you enjoy more, which will then make you feel more joy and more happy, I imagine. And when you're around the people you love and care about, that will make you feel more joy and more happiness.
I think so. And I think sometimes the daily slog can just take happiness out of our daily, we're doing the ins and outs of life and feeling pressured and busy. One of the things that Sam said about when we were away, when we were in Asia, because he was with me, he said it was so nice to see you in an environment where you didn't have any of the other responsibilities and you were just being who you are.
Yeah.
And that really made me think again that sometimes you don't always bring the best to your everyday, and happiness can get sucked out of the fact, I've got parents' evening booking to do, I've got dinner to make, washing in the machine. I mean, none of these things are major deals of life, but when there's 50 of them in one day, and then throw in something going wrong, like the printer not working like it wasn't on Monday, maybe that happiness doesn't always come through.
I also think about, I was watching a video of someone saying how she really feels the weather dictates how she feels, and how she started a practice of when it's really cold and dark and gloomy, leaning into, actually it's just an opportunity to be cozy and put the fire on. And it's such a small thing, but I've tried to do that myself. And normally when it's raining, I'm like, it's so annoying, like ruins everything. But actually reframing that into, okay, it's cozy, it's just a different way of thinking, then prevents me from feeling sloggy and getting myself down, and then by the time you know it, I've had a bad day because it's raining outside.
And that comes back to the idea that sometimes happiness is a choice, right? Not that people don't walk through really dark times, and that's not an easy time to be happy, but there are lots of times where we could reframe and just say, do you know what, this is just weather, it's not in my control, and it's not something that should affect my mood or my state of mind. And actually seeing the opportunity and the gratitude in every day, as cheesy as that might sound, can really make us feel happier, and depending on how we start the day.
It links to the episode you did on letting go and reframing things as gratitude, which is probably a good place for people to listen to.
And I think maybe that's a good kind of finishing thought. I guess my thoughts as I've reflected on this podcast, one is imagining our future self and thinking imagining our future self and what might we regret if we don't make changes now. And I think on the flip side, thinking, how can I be true to myself and make choices to be appreciative and happy and grateful, and to embrace the opportunity of every day while I've got the chance. So there's definitely room for regret in the moment, but let's try to live lives that mean that we don't have any of these big ones when we get to the end of our lives.